Especially in watchmaking, newer is not always better. Today we will show you why we choose these vintage Omega movements for our watches and what makes them so special.
This is the Omega Calibre 266, a watch movement from the 1950s, which can be found inside many nowadays valuable vintage Omega watches such as Omega Ranchero and Rail Master. This example has the original dial and hands in excellent condition. Usually we try to buy only the movements because we don't use the dials and hands for anything, and basically we never buy complete vintage watches and strip them apart because that would be a waste. Our idea is to give a new life to the movements that would be otherwise forgotten.
During the disassembly it's very important to be gentle and careful with these parts, as even though we don't use the dial and hands, somebody will for sure have use for these rare vintage parts for their own watches. The disassembly starts with the removal of the hands and the dial, and after that we get to the dial side parts. Now here are some smaller parts that will be on their way when we flip it to the movement side, so those are removed first. On the movement side we start with the capstone jewels, and after that we start to remove the balance assembly. The balance is removed first because it is the most delicate part of the movement, and it is important to get it out of the way so it has the least risk of damage. Then we move to the winding system. Here it is important to keep these components in good condition because we will be using these in our own watch. We will refinish them completely, but it's much easier to refinish a good quality part than a damaged one.
During the refinishing process, the ratchet and crown wheels are given a traditional snailing finish by us, and we're also experimenting on other finishes for these components. We do extensive black polishing in many of the original steel parts, for example the ratchet wheel and crown wheel screws, the ratchet click itself, and so on.
As we continue the disassembly, we remove the pallet fork bridge and the pallet fork itself. These are components that we do use in our own watch, as the manufacture of our own pallet fork is not yet feasible. The same goes for the main plate and the gear train, which are made of high enough quality that we can refinish them to a new-like condition.
We don't use the original bridges. Instead, we have designed our own barrel bridge and balance bridge, which are machined for us from German silver in Finland. The fit and finish is done completely in-house at our workshop in Porvoo. The bridges have hand-filed and hand-polished bevels with sharp inner angles. This is also known as anglage. If you look closely, you can find many other traditional finishes in the bridges, such as mirror-polished bevels around the jewels. And we also do amazing Côte de Genève, Geneva stripes in the bridges in-house. For the bridges we make our own screws from scratch. And this is mainly because this way we can make sure that the quality is where we want it to be, and also it makes the finishing process significantly easier.
On the dial side of the movement, we find the time setting components. These components are all used in our watch, as these go hand in hand with the main plate. And now to the tricky part. Here we can see the balance components of the Calibre 266 movement, and we will be using the balance wheel and the hair springs out of it. As we have our own new bridge, we will be using also the balance stud holder screw, which is the smallest screw in this movement. The balance components are the most delicate part of the mechanical movement, and they must be always handled with utmost care. Luckily, as a graduates from the Finnish School of Watchmaking, we have the necessary skills and knowledge to make our own hairsprings, and in the future we plan of making good use of that.
In addition to the balance and pallet fork, the gear train consists of escapement wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, center wheel, and the barrel. When using these old movements as the base of our own watch, we need to carefully examine the condition of the pivots and polish them if necessary. Here you can see Rene looking at the pivots under a microscope, which is super useful as the pivots and staffs are extremely small. The pivots are polished using a old excellent pivot polishing machine which is attached to the line and vise on our work table.
The main reason why the pivots are polished is to reduce friction on the bearing surfaces. Friction is the main enemy of accurate timekeeping, so everything should be done to reduce it to a minimum. When polishing the pivots, it is vital to put the setup correctly before you start. It is important to take your time with the settings, because with the correct setup, it is relatively easy to achieve a high level of polish with minimal risk of destroying the parts. For pivot polishing, we use a hardened steel file we made at school on the first year, and when polishing it is vital to keep the gear turning at all times when the file is moving. It's easy to hear when the file is doing its job. We are ready when all the pivots are straight and highly polished. Depending on the condition of the vintage movement, it may take between 10 minutes and 1 hour per wheel to polish it to a great condition. Thank you for watching till the end, and we hope that you enjoyed this video of our process.
Please let us know in the comments if you have any feedback, ideas or suggestions for future videos.